Hello and welcome to Delaney Studios YouTube channel. Today I'll be teaching you how to draw this beautiful tiger lily. So we'll be using pencils today. So the tools you need today are a 2B pencil, a 4B pencil, a 6B pencil, a couple of smudging sticks or paper stumps. If you don't have those, you can use tissues. You need a normal white eraser and you need a kneadable rubber. If you don't have a kneadable rubber, you can use Blutack. Okay, so 2B for starting to draw, 4B for your grey shades, and 6B for your darkest darks. Okay, I'm going to zoom in and let's get started. Okay, so we've got our page in portrait. So what we need to do first is plan. So what I want to do is put in some guidelines. When you're drawing guidelines, you always want to be using your 2B pencil. And you want to keep them very, very soft. So try not to press too hard with this one. So I want to make sure that I have how high my flower is going to be, how wide my flower is going to be, and where that bottom petal comes to. So I've got 4 guidelines: top, bottom, sides. The next step of drawing is to break things down into shapes. So the easiest way to break down this particular artwork into shapes is to draw one petal at a time. So we're going to come in and draw a petal that's on the right hand side. So first what we need to do is find the center of our area. So I'm going to say it's about here, and I'm going to draw a bit of a sad mouth. Don't do it too big, otherwise you'll run out of room for all these petals. So we've got 6 petals to do. We start with a sad mouth. This is still with 2B. I'm going to curve it outwards. It's fine if you come past your little guideline there. That doesn't matter. It's only there just to make sure we don't run out of space on our page. That's petal number 1. Petal number 2. I'm going to start with this lower one because it's easier to get to. So it does touch the first petal. That comes down. It's sort of 2-phase here. So I'm going past my guideline again, which is totally fine. The next one I want to do starts from the center again. I'm going to come up. I'm going to come out, a little bit of a point on the end, touch petal number 2. Petal number 3 starts, well, petal number 4 starts from petal number 3. Has a bit of a curved end here, and then comes back to the center. Petal number 5 starts from petal number 4. Again, I'm going to go over my guideline, that's fine. As long as I don't run out of paper, that's all that matters. So you can only guess where we're roughly going to go. Back to the center. So it looks very strange at this point. Remember, if it looks wrong, it's right, because it's not finished. Last petal, petal number 6. Like that. So it is on a bit of an angle facing this way. That's what we're trying to get at. We can also get the stem in, and once we've got the stem in, we'll be rubbing out the guidelines because we don't need them anymore. So the stem fits in between our first and second petal that we drew, and it just kind of disappears. So just get lighter as you sort of flick it away. And that's your basics. So now we can get our eraser and we can rub out our guidelines. So with your 2B, you can come back in and just join up any of those lines that you accidentally rubbed out. That's fine. And we've got our basic shape. So we're up to planning our little stamens. So the stamens are the center parts of the flower with the pollen. So we're not going to count these ones. We're just going to draw as many that fit. So all we need to do is a skinny tube like that. And then it's going to have a little skinny sausage shape on top. Just a small one. And do as many of those as you like. Don't count them. Okay, we've got our little stamens. So now what we're going to do is start adding some shading, so we can move up to our 4B when we're ready. Got my 4B pencil here, nice and sharp. What you want to make sure you do is just make sure you move your hand back on your pencil. This holding position is fantastic for writing or getting in really fine detail, but we tend to press too hard. So what you want to do is just move your hand a little bit further back, and we're going to start building up the shadow in each petal. So I'm going to do a zoom in just on petal number 1, and I'll slowly work my way around just like we did when we drew them in. Okay, we've got a nice close-up of petal number 1, the first one we drew. And then what you do again, hold your pencil a bit further back, and I'm just going to very, very lightly flick shade. So I'm using no pressure at all on my pencil, and I'm just flicking away. So I really do lift up my pencil towards the end of the flick. And I'm trying to build up a little bit of shadow curving over. So we start to curve to the left on the left-hand side of the petal. In the middle of the petal, we go straight. And then on the right side of the petal, we curve it slightly to the right. Remember to move your page so it's easier for your hand. And we will be smudging these later too. And again, if you don't have a smudging stick, or if they're known in the shops as paper stumps, use a tissue. I'm also going to create a bit of a center line down my flower. So it'll look like a bit of a highlight down the middle. Using a colouring motion. It's not perfect, it's very stripy, and that's normal. Okay, so I've sort of left a little bit of a highlight on the left, a little bit of a highlight in the middle, a little bit of a highlight on the right. So I'm going to show you what it looks like when we smudge it. So we'll just do one petal at a time. So with your smudging stick, you can use either end of these or use a tissue. You want to smudge in a nice long direction down the petal, even over the highlighted bits, because we can highlight them with our Kneadable or Blutack. The aim is a smooth shadow. It should look like one big grey petal. And don't worry if you get stuff, the shading or smudging outside of the shape, because you just use your Kneadable to clean up those bits. We can also create highlights using our smudge Blutack or your Kneadable rubber out of the smudging. So what we're going to do is just pull it down the center to create a highlight. I'm going to pull a little bit on the left. Again, just a flicky motion as well, so it's nice and smooth. I'll do a little bit on this edge. And then a little bit on the top edge. If you feel like you've taken out a little bit too much, so I've taken out a little bit too much here, looks a bit outlined, we can just bring our smudging stick or tissue back in and just re-smudge anything that's a little bit too highlighted. And that's your basics of your petal. So we're going to move on to petal number 2 and do the same thing again. So what we're doing is just building up our base shading, and then we'll come in and do the beautiful little spots on each petal, which is very common in these tiger lilies. So again, with our 4B pencil, I'm going to move on to petal number 2. I'm just going to slowly move around and do the same thing. And don't worry if the petals look like they're sort of mixing into one another. We highlight in 6B later. You don't have to colour everything. And highlight. Bring back anything that you think may need a little bit more of a shadow. And don't get worried that these two look a bit lost, because again, we're coming back in with 6B. Petal number 3, back to your 4B pencil. It's going to be darker coming from the centre of the flower. There's more shading there. And just make sure you go around your stamens, so don't go over those. Keep checking the position of your hand that's not too far forward on the pencil. Nothing special about the filling in, it's all in the smudging. Don't worry about smudging over any of the stamens. You can pick them out with your kneadable rubber. We'll do that at the end. It's getting a little bit lighter. Petal number 4, this funny little skinny one. And I'm going to turn it on its side to make it easier for my wrist. Okay, smudge. Don't worry about the stamens. You can pull out the highlights again later. Easier to ignore them. Try and go around them when smudging. Unless you've got a really tiny smudging stick. Okay, now we pull out the highlights. We'll keep working it till you're happy. Okay, number 5. This one doesn't have much shading in it at all. It's hitting a lot of light. We do have to remember that these flowers are actually white, so we don't want to go too heavy. Bit of a shadow at the centre, not too much in between. Not much shading at all. Clean up my edges. And we do our highlights. If your highlights get a bit stripy like mine was starting to, I just pulled out a bit extra and then we just re-smudge over the top to smooth it out. Seems to work quite well. A little highlight. Last petal. 4B still. That's pretty much it. And then we smudge. big grey blob. You come in, just clean up any little smudgy bits. Really actually doesn't matter that much because we are going to add a bit of a background to our flower. Now we're going to get a new bit of Blutack or Kneadable rubber and just give it a bit of a pinch. We're going to do our highlights with a clean section. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just clean up our little stamens, so little areas where the pollen is kept. And I'm just going to get my Kneadable and just run it down each of those little stems just to give them a little highlight. So you want to squeeze it into a thin line. And if you take out a bit too much, you can always come back in with a bit of 4B and colour down each side just to make sure that they stand out. You can smudge that later. So a bit more highlighted. So we can come in with 6B now. And what we're going to do is we're going to outline each petal and we're going to add a little bit more shading into each one. So let's start with petal number 1. So again, that's with 6B. A little bit more shading just in the centre. Yeah, it builds up the depth. Keep building up in between those little stamens, makes them stand out a lot more too. Just adding a little bit of extra shadow in, so I'm not pushing on my 6B. Notice I'm also not holding it really close to the tip. Okay, now let's smudge. Use my small smudging stick for in between. And you can just twist your tissue if you need to get a smaller angle, a little pointed twist. And again, pull out any highlights if you feel like you've lost any. And then we can use our 6B to do some of these lovely little spots. Literally just doing them as little stripes. And then what you want to do is just smudge over the top just to soften them up a bit and push them into the paper. Otherwise they're a little bit obvious, they look a little bit fake. And the key is don't overdo them. Don't do them over the whole petal, you're just doing them around the centre. Don't forget the petals are curved, so you'll be doing them on a slight curve as well. And don't press. Just subtle. There's your little spots. So we can now come in and do the little stamens. So you can give them a bit of an outline if you'd like them to stand out a bit, or you can just outline one side so it looks like it's got a bit of a shadow. And the pollen bit's just basically completely coloured in with 6B. And that's all you need to do for the little stamens. Then we've got the little stem. So what we're trying to do is create an illusion of a 3D round stem. So what you want to do is build up the shadow on either side and leave the center fairly light. Obviously there's going to be a lot of shadow underneath your petals here first. So I'll cast a shadow. And then what you want to do is very softly just flick it down either side, and in the centre you just want to leave it alone. Don't put any lead in the centre. Really darken up those sides. So already getting an idea that it's round. And then what I want you to do is actually smudge that. Smudge the whole thing. Then we're going to pull out the highlight with your Kneadable. And we're getting a round look. And literally the last thing that we need to do now is build up some background. So we're actually going to do this with our 6B, and this is going to hide some of our outlining, because outlining that dark can make it look a little bit fake, so, or cartoon. So what you want to do is just use your 6B, use the side of the lead rather than the tip, just to build up some shadow. And it's going to be darker than your petal, just close to the flower. Extra shading under the stem. I'm trying to do is get it a bit darker closer to these corners, because they do cause a shadow. It also helps blend that outline into the background. So don't worry if you go over any edges, pretty easy to fix with your Kneadable. Then we smudge. I like to smudge in circular motions just so I don't get stripy sort of finish. I want it to look a bit misty. Feel like anything's getting lost, you can re-outline, make it pop again. You don't have to do the background, but it does make the whole flower really pop out of the page, way more 3D. And it does hide your colouring lines and smooth out those outlines too. If you need to take a break from doing the flower in the background, you can always pause the video and come back to it if you feel like your hand's a bit sore or you feel like you need a break. Take the break because it's a lot of colouring. I had a little bump underneath my artwork here, so if you do have that, I think it was a bit of rubbing out, you can just lighten it up and then re-smudge it, and that should get rid of most of it. It'll hide it a bit more. So again, pull out any little highlights that you feel might have been lost a bit because your hand will get quite dirty from being running it over your artwork, so you can lighten up any little areas you feel may need a bit more of a highlight to separate them from the background. Or you can re-outline your flower if you feel like it needs it. And of course, don't forget to get your 2B back, and you're going to write your name on it and write to the year. If you have a signature, pop your signature in. If you don't, you can just write your name. It's always good to put your mark on your artwork. And pop the year in, it's always really important. And that's your beautiful tiger lily complete. We'll see you next time for the next lesson.